Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're diving into something that completely flips the script on how we think about money. For decades, we've basically been taught that managing our finances is this rigid, cold math problem. You know the drill. Just plug in the right data, memorize a few formulas, follow the spreadsheets perfectly, and you will inevitably get rich. But what if that entire premise is actually flawed? What if financial success isn't really a hard science at all, but rather a behavioral science?
Think about this for a second. Doing well with money isn't about what you know, it's how you behave. That is the absolute central thesis of Morgan Housel's brilliant framework in his work, The Psychology of Money. Housel makes this incredibly compelling argument that doing well financially actually has surprisingly little to do with your raw intelligence, your formal education, or even how much money you take home on payday. Instead, it has everything to do with how you behave. It's about your relationship with risk, your everyday habits, and maybe most importantly, how you manage your own ego. From his perspective, a literal genius who loses control of their emotions can trigger a total financial disaster. Meanwhile, an ordinary person with zero formal financial education can build incredible, life-changing wealth simply by mastering a few fundamental behavioral skills. Okay, let's dive into this. Here is our roadmap for today's explainer. We're going to start by looking at why finance is a behavior problem. Then we'll explore the hidden forces of luck and risk, contrast the mindset of getting rich versus staying wealthy, reveal why true wealth is actually invisible, and finally, we'll talk about how freedom is the ultimate wealth. Let's get right to it. Section 1. Finance is a behavior problem, the 80-20 rule of money. So here is a massive baseline idea to wrap our heads around. No one is crazy with money. I know. We often look at how other people spend or invest and think, wow, they are making completely irrational choices. But instead of criticizing others or even beating ourselves up for our own past financial decisions, we have to practice some empathy. Housel explains that people aren't always mathematically rational, like a perfectly coded spreadsheet, but they are always trying to be reasonable based on their own unique lived experiences. Think about it. A person who grew up in extreme poverty is going to view financial risk entirely differently than someone who was born into a wealthy family. An investor who lived through a devastating stock market crash is going to have a completely different worldview than someone who has only ever seen markets go up and up. The takeaway here is that our perspectives on money are heavily biased by our own deeply personal experiences. Moving right along to Section 2. Hidden forces, luck, and risk. The uncontrollable variables in wealth creation. We all love to believe that hard work and intelligence are a direct, guaranteed formula for success, right? But that completely ignores two monumental, uncontrollable forces: luck and risk. In life, and especially in the stock market, most outcomes are actually driven by what statisticians call tail events. Now, if you're not a math nerd, a tail event is simply a rare, highly impactful occurrence that sits way out at the extreme ends of a bell curve. Take a look at this staggering statistic. Since 1980, a mere 7% of companies in the massive Russell 3000 index drove effectively all of the market's net gains. Just 7%. Meanwhile, a huge portion of the other 93% dropped in value and, frankly, never recovered. What this means is that you can actually be wrong much of the time in finance, but if you happen to catch one of these rare tail events, it can do absolutely all the heavy lifting for your portfolio. Let's put this into a deeply practical, relatable perspective with a name we all know, Warren Buffett. He is arguably the greatest investor of all time, right? And he has owned hundreds of different stocks throughout his entire life. But his immense, world-changing wealth largely came from just about 10 tail event investments held over many decades. Just 10. It wasn't about being this flawless genius on every single trade he ever made. It was about consistency. It was about patience, allowing the quiet, incredible power of compounding to work over a ridiculously long timeline, and being positioned to benefit from rare moments of good luck while surviving the inevitable risks. Section 3. Getting rich versus staying wealthy. Two entirely different mindsets. It turns out acquiring money and keeping that money require completely opposite psychological traits. Getting rich demands optimism. It requires putting yourself out there, taking calculated risks, being brave, and really swinging for the fences. But staying wealthy? That requires the exact opposite. It demands a healthy dose of pessimism, extreme frugality, honestly, a little bit of paranoia, and most importantly, a humble survivor mentality. You have to be almost terrified that what you've built could be taken away. Being great at earning money absolutely does not mean you are automatically equipped to keep it.
So just how hard is financial survival? Remember those publicly traded companies we talked about a minute ago? Well, Housel points out a pretty wild reality. Roughly 40% of companies that are successful enough to become publicly traded eventually lose effectively all of their value. 40%. Even on the Forbes 400 list of the richest Americans, there is about a 20% turnover every single decade, and that has absolutely nothing to do with death or inheritance. Keeping money is a brutal game of survival, and the only way to win is to ensure you can stick around long enough to let compounding do its magic without making a catastrophic, game-ending mistake. Which brings us to Section 4. True wealth is actually invisible, breaking the illusion of spending. As humans, we are basically wired to judge success by what we can physically see. So when we see someone driving a $100,000 car or posting these lavish pictures from a luxury villa on social media, our brain immediately fires off and says, wow, that person is wealthy. But Housel asks us to redefine wealth entirely, because true wealth is exactly what you do not see. Wealth is the nice cars not purchased. It's the first-class upgrades politely declined. It is the financial assets, the savings, the index funds, the retirement accounts that haven't yet been converted into the visible stuff you see. Let's look at two incredible, real-world examples that perfectly highlight this illusion. Take Ronald Reed. He was a modest janitor and gas station attendant in Vermont who lived an entirely unflashy, quiet life. But when he died, he shocked absolutely everyone by leaving behind an $8 million fortune. He quietly amassed this wealth through consistent, humble investing. It's just a brilliant reminder that ordinary people can absolutely win this game. Now contrast him with the global pop superstar Rihanna. Her highly visible, incredibly extravagant early spending famously drove her near bankruptcy, which actually prompted her to sue her financial advisor. And that lawsuit led to one of the most amusing yet totally profound quotes in modern financial history. Her advisor responded to the lawsuit by stating on the record, was it really necessary to tell her that if you spend money on things, you will end up with the things and not the money? I mean, it sounds like a punchline, but it points to a massive psychological blind spot we all have. When most people say they want to be a millionaire, they don't actually want $1 million sitting quietly in an investment account. They mean they want to spend $1 million. And as we now know, spending $1 million is literally the exact opposite of being a millionaire.
All right, Section 5. Freedom is the ultimate wealth, using money to buy time and choices.
Here is the crucial takeaway from all of this. The highest form of wealth isn't a luxury item. It is freedom. But achieving that freedom requires mastering your own ego and really figuring out what your personal definition of enough is. A high savings rate isn't about pinching pennies and being miserable. It's fundamentally about raising your humility. Endless comparison can lead to incredibly destructive financial behavior. It's about just not caring what others think of your visible lifestyle. Because if your ego rises just as fast as your paycheck does, your savings are always going to sit right at zero. You have to create a deliberate gap between what you earn and the lifestyle you display to the world. And this leads us to a really liberating strategy. Step 1 is lowering that ego to income gap we just talked about. Step 2 is going to sound a bit rebellious, but save money without a specific goal. We are always told to save for a house or a car or retirement, right? But Housel argues you should just save aimlessly. Why? Because of Step 3, unassigned savings by the absolute ultimate luxury, which is flexibility. Having money in the bank gives you the autonomy to wait for a better job, the freedom to handle a sudden medical emergency without totally panicking, and the ability to wake up every single morning and say, I can do whatever I want today. So let's pull all of this together into a cohesive, practical framework that you can use to evaluate your own relationship with money. Now, keep in mind this isn't personalized financial advice, it's a behavioral checklist. First, take a hard look at your ego to income gap. Are you spending just to impress people? Second, respect that luck and risk are huge factors. Don't assume every winner is a genius and every loser is foolish. Third, prioritize your financial survival and the flexibility to weather storms rather than trying to make a quick buck. Fourth, immediately stop comparing yourself to the visible spending of others. Remember, true wealth is what you don't see. And finally, get out of your own way and let the quiet, magical power of compounding work over a long timeline. Ultimately, it all comes down to a fundamental choice in how you view the purpose of your capital. Every single dollar you spend is a trade-off between a momentary hit of visible status today and a permanent piece of autonomy tomorrow. So I'll leave you with this one provocative question to reflect on as we wrap up today's explainer. Are you using your money to tirelessly chase things, or are you using it to finally chase freedom?